Did you know like where you were heading? Did you how much autonomy did you have in determining where to go?
None. You expressed your wishes. So because we were a small course, they had planned the training sequence in a certain fashion, and there weren't any fighter slots available. And we had 2 guys on the course who should have gone to fighters. One did eventually, but about 3 months before we graduated, they came around and they said, okay, fill out your preferences. What do you want to be? And what was fascinating, when I'd sat for my interview board, I wanted to fly Canberra bombers. That was the dream that I had. The president of the board was a Canberra pilot, and there's a bit of a funny story about that. But Canberra's had been in my mind. But then when we were at Pierce, I went for a flight in the search and rescue helicopter, the SAR chopper, and I just said, wow, this has got to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. I mean, it was just the sensations and the low flying and everything else, and I thought, wow, this is fantastic. So when it came down to working out the preferences, I just put helicopters and anything else you want. I didn't really care. Vietnam was in full swing at the time, needed helicopter pilots anyway. So 6 of us, 6 out of the 9 graduates, plus all of the mids, went on to helicopter training. I wanted to go because the sensation that I'd experienced sitting in the helicopter was just enough to make me think that this was really, really great stuff. Nothing I've done since has changed my mind. And the fact was, I was second last out of all the graduates, and I was the only one that actually got my first preference. So all the others wanted to do things. Some went to fly Neptune Maritime, some went to Hercs, some went to Caribous, and the rest of us went to Iroquois. And all of the others, the guy that wanted to go to fighters went to Caribous. The maritime navigator wanted to go to maritime, and he went to Hercs. One of the Herc navigators. It was just a fascinating thing. But I think, like I said, I think I was the only guy that actually got his first preference, as in I wanted helicopters, and no one else really got what they wanted. So that was certainly, I was happy. I won't say no. I can't be certain that no one else got what their preferences were, but many of them didn't have available what they wanted. There were no bombers, there were no fighters, so people that wanted those things couldn't get them. I came off the pilot's course, and the conversion course for helicopters started in January, so I had a 3-month waiting period. So what they did was they sent me from Pierce to Sale to fly Macchi's some more as a qualified Macchi pilot, to fly ground controlled approaches and UHF direction finding approaches to train air traffic controllers. So we were at Sale. I'd have to look in the logbook, but I did another 70 or 80 hours. So you got 220 hours of flying the Macchi. I got an extra 80 hours in 3 months, probably more than that, because I ended up with well over 300 flying stuff, and
doing a lot of takeoff and
landing. I could do the visualise the GCA ground control approach circuit at Sale for years. If I had to fly it in cloud, I would know what I was flying over perfectly because of the sequence that we kept flying. Had an interesting event there. It's one of those things about flying. You learn a lot about the environment. You learn about yourself. You learn all sorts of things. We had I just got tasked to go flying the aircraft. Macchi had full big tanks, which meant it was overweight. You could only land with 30 gallon. It had 30 gallon and 70 gallon tip tanks. If you had 30 gallon tip tanks, you could take off. You could land straight away. 70 gallon tip tanks, you were supposed to burn off 40 gallons a side before you reached landing weight. So what we would do is we would take off, we would fly GCAs and do overshoots and burn the fuel down for, it took about 15 minutes or so to get down to landing weight, maybe 20. And I came around the circuit after my first circuit in the overshoot. I climbed out and I was going back to do another one, and I thought I'll do a high speed one, simulating being in a Mirage. I mean, you know, when you're 19 years old, you're in your own jet, you know, you're 20 foot tall and bulletproof. You're actually not, but you think you are. Anyway, I started to accelerate, and I looked out in front of me, and there were a flight of the Sale magpie geese in front of me. And I saw them and tried to evade by stuffing the nose forward and so on, and I felt a thump through the airframe and roll wings level, and I thought, wow, I've had a bird strike. And I very coolly and calmly put out an emergency call, pan, Mike 50, bird strike 3 south of the field, coming back for a landing. And I thought, you know, that I'd handled it really, really well, went around, came, and as I was on finals, flying it around, without any real problem. I'd worked out that probably I had trouble moving the rudders, but I was on finals when I realised I was overweight for landing. So I called and said, oh, well, I'll overshoot and I'll burn off the fuel. Can I dump fuel over the field? Well, there's a dump switch on the thing. So overshooting, hit the dump switch, and I sat back then totally confident of what an absolute ace I was. And I woke up with the stick hard against my right leg, and I looked out the right tank and there's a flow of fuel coming out, looked at the left tank and there's nothing coming out of it. So I now had an asymmetric fuel load. You need rudder, pushed on the rudder and it wouldn't move. So the bird had hit me on the tip of the fin and actually folded the metals. I didn't know anything about it, so I didn't try pushing it, which might have worked because it was very light metal, but as far as I was concerned, came around, landed, and got it down successfully with a high-speed landing and using all of the runway. And at the end of it, the real crux of the story is I thought what a wonderful job I'd done. That night in the bar with nursing sisters and instructors everywhere, because this is where all the instructors in the Air Force were taught and so on. The air traffic controllers, who I'd been giving a pretty hard time for a little while, brought in the tape and played it, and the base level call was a very nice equal Mike 50 is overshooting for further GCA, and the next call is about 6 octaves higher, as I thought I was going to die, and it really was. I realised then that, you know, you often think you're in control, the time expansion, all those sorts of things that people talk about were fascinating, and that was my first real experience of having stuff scared out of me, I guess, in that sense. I was horrified that something was really wrong. As you go on, aviation is a very unforgiving thing, and I ended up in safety, and we might get to that. But it's a key of it all is that we work to learn from other people's experience. And, you know, I've had a few of those and I've listened to a lot, so read a lot. So, yeah, that's sort of it.